and Certus. Get all the details at citrusexpo.net. That's citrusexpo.net.
I'm Tyron Spearman for Southeast AgNet.
When it really counts, depend on the source for the latest weather updates, keeping you ahead of the storm. 96.3 FM, 1370 AM, The Source.
Becoming cloudy and humid today with a thunderstorm. High today 90 to 92, then partly cloudy tonight, low 74 to 76. Saturday will be a humid day with a mix of clouds and sunshine. Watch for an afternoon thunderstorm with a high of 90 to 94. Then Sunday we'll have clouds and sunshine with a thunderstorm and a high of 91 to 93. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm Holly Holdren.
You know what you want to do in retirement, but do you know how to get there? Tune in to Coasting into Retirement with Gary Marriage of Nature Coast Financial Advisors, Sunday mornings at 8 to get answers to your retirement planning questions. Plan today so you can do the things you've always dreamt about doing in retirement. Listen Sunday mornings at 8 to Coasting into Retirement with Gary Marriage of Nature Coast Financial Advisors.
Our firm offers insurance services.
This is Ocala Talks with Tom Schmidt, bringing stories that are important to our community in and around Ocala. Plus, of course, a splash of sports as well. Now, here's your host, Tom.
I could go to an airport and just sit and watch planes take off and land all day. Cooler of beer, a couple sandwiches, sitting on the bed of a truck, just watching the planes land and take off. And I would venture to say I'm not the only one that can do that, although I may be the only one that would admit I can do that. I think a lot of guys would do that. Hey, I want to give you a recap of last night's debate that was hosted by the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 129 and the Professional Firefighters of Ocala, Local 2135. I give you some of the statements were pretty good. They had a statement for every question. Before the question was asked, there was a statement that was read. Some of them was pretty good. Some of them asked about benefits that were cut, reduced pensions, elimination of longevity pay, how the minimum wage increases were going to affect pay rates for first responders and police and EMTs and firefighters, and because there was a question of retention. It's been said for a very long time that Ocala and Marion County trains police officers and first responders for their next job. And that was a question last night. If you were going to be a city council member, what are some of the plans or thoughts you have on how to retain, recruit and retain the best and brightest to serve our community? That was a big question. They wanted to know what's going to be done to try to retain all these people we're training, because you get some great people that are trained, but then they don't retain them. They don't keep them in-house. They keep them, they get their experience, and they go elsewhere because the money's better elsewhere. What do you do about that? That was one of the questions that was asked last night of all the candidates. The question of how the firing of Fire Chief Shane Alexander came up in a roundabout way. The question was asked that if elected, what do you consider to be your role as a city council member, and how do you plan to hold those under the city council's purview accountable to ensure all employees are given the opportunity to address disciplinary issues through due process. A lot of people answered that question talking directly about the situation with the city manager Sandra Wilson and fired fire chief Shane Alexander. That was not the question. A couple people answered the actual question. Most people just talked about the issue of how the firing was handled of the fire chief Shane Alexander. But that wasn't the question. The question was, if elected, how are you going to hold the people that answer directly to you accountable so that they understand that due process needs to happen so that people just can't be arbitrarily fired? It was pointed out that it is a will hire state and people can arbitrarily be fired. Matter of fact, one candidate said something that a lot of other people I've seen on Facebook, a lot of people went, I don't even know what she was talking about. One candidate said, look, I can fire you if you got green eyes. Huh? Huh? I can fire you if you got green eyes. What? Huh? But that was just one of the responses. But a lot of people didn't answer that question correctly because they were talking about the situation that's already passed. And the question wanted to know, what would you do about a situation if it arose like that again in the future? The statements were really poignant. I'll be honest with you. There was some talk about the one-cent sales tax and how it is believed by fire and police that they've had some of their stuff that they should get the penny sales tax for infrastructure improvements with them and facilities and vehicles and equipment that they feel this year they got cut because of other city projects. Mostly the parking garage is going to be built north of State Road 40. And this was a mixed response by the candidates. Some of the candidates pointed out that there are 3 new fire stations, 2 new police stations with another police station, another police substation in the works. The new equipment has been bought for the, first responders at the police department. Other candidates go, why are we building a parking garage east east of State Road north of State Road 40 when we can't even get people to cross State Road 40? So there was a lot of different thought processes on that question about, do you think it's appropriate to cut funding for public safety to finance new growth? A lot of people understood that growth is going to happen. There was one candidate that really, it was apparent that growth is not something they want. They want Ocala the way it was in the 60s. That was apparent from one candidate, but, that's not going to happen. That ship sailed. It's 2021 now. It's not 1960. Ocala's never going to be a 2-lane 200 with a horse farm instead of a mall where the mall is. It's not going to happen. That was the 60s. This is 2021. The mall may go away, but it's not going to be replaced by a horse farm. I promise you that. That was one of the questions. And then the last question that was asked of the city council, people that were running for city council, talked about annexing. They said the city of Ocala is growing at an exponential rate by annexing more and more land. Well, everyone to a person said that annexation should be smart growth, not growth just to be growing. But they did say that there are little hamlets or pockets of the county that are surrounded by the city. And they made point of an accident, a tragedy that happened some years ago where a house was on fire and people thought it was the city, but after learning, figuring it out through 911 and all, it was actually the county that owned it. It was county property, but it was inside the city, but it was county property. By the time the county responded to the fire, a child had perished. And that those little nooks and crannies need to be annexed into the city to alleviate those kind of situations. That is a much bigger priority than just getting big tracts of land annexed into the city just for the city to grow. And I think everybody agreed that is accurate, that you need to, if you ever go and look at the city and county map as an overlay, there are small pockets of land all throughout the city that are owned by the county. It's just how it's one of those freaky things with how county lines are drawn and the city lines are drawn. There are small pockets all over the city that are county, and so those have to be those would be a priority to be annexed by all the people that were running for council. They said those would be the priority to annex first, because when you talk to annexation, you talk about when you annex more land, you got to have more police officers, you got to have more fire personnel. And so, that growing number of calls, more people that get annexed into the city, that adds to the growing number of calls. So I thought all in all, the 4 questions that were asked of the candidates running for city council were very well thought out, and they were answered pretty well by most of the candidates. I will tell you that I didn't think any candidate doesn't have the best interest of Ocala at heart. How they achieved that was definitely up for debate amongst all the candidates, but I think they all have made a decision to run for public office because they want to make a better Ocala. And, that's all you can ask. Now, you can make your decision on who you vote for by who closely matches your thoughts on how to make Ocala a better place. But all 15 candidates, all 14 candidates were there last night, I believe, all want to make Ocala a better place. They just have, all of them have different ways of going about achieving that. The mayoral questions were a little different. They concern community policing and law enforcement. Where do they stand on defunding the police, reducing the size of the police by replacing officers with social workers, ending qualified immunity, and they ask all of those questions, and they think that'd be in the best interest of Ocala. The candidates had very different answers for that, as was to be expected, because they come at it from very different angles. But both gave answers that were well thought out, and I'm sure to each candidate made sense to them. I won't tell you which way I'm leaning. I will just tell you that the questions were asked, and both candidates did not dodge the question. Both candidates gave you the answer that they thought was appropriate, and whether you agree with that answer or not, at least they didn't dodge the question. The other question was asked point blank: would you renew Chief Balkin's contract as the Ocala Police Department chief, or would you seek to hire a new chief, and why? I thought that was a little uncomfortable question, especially with the chief sitting in the room. Both candidates, one immediately when they stood up said they would continue Chief Balkin's contract. The other candidate stood up and gave reasons of that. The other candidate stood up and said that they would speak with the chief, see what the chief's plan was, make sure that they understood where the police department was headed, what direction it was headed in, and then at the very end said, and I'd keep the chief. So both of them are on record as saying they would keep the chief if elected as the Ocala mayor. I would have followed that up and said, okay, you'll keep the chief, but for what period of time? Will you just keep the chief because that gets you elected, and then once you're in office, a few months in, you'll fire the chief, as happened to fire Chief Shane Alexander, in my opinion, just my opinion. Tom Schmitz, if you got a problem with it, Tom at WOCA.com. In my opinion, the fire chief was let go by Sandra Wilson as a political hatchet job, because Sandra Wilson did not like the fact that he was the person that if she slipped would be replacing her. In her mind, she saw him as competition, and the best way to get rid of competition is to fire him, and that was well within her right to do under the city charter, and so she did it knowing that the city council couldn't do anything about it because of the way the charter was written. That's my personal belief. I don't care if you agree with me or not. That's what I think. That may not be the case, but in my opinion, with everything I've seen evidence-wise, that's what happened. in my opinion. I would ask a follow-up to this question: will you, 3 months in, get rid of the police chief because now you're in charge and you want to put your own people in there? You wouldn't fire him when you first become mayor, but are you committed to the police chief? As long as he doesn't do anything that is derogatory towards the job, are you committed to keeping him as police chief the entire time? I would have followed up with that question, but that was not a follow-up. Maybe we'll ask that when they come in, when they're here in the third week of August. The question of the militarization of the police department came up. The 1033 program, which allows the police departments around the country to buy military-style equipment at pennies on the dollar from the U.S. military after it's been used by the U.S. military and replaced with new equipment, then it's sold for pennies on the dollar to law enforcement across the country. Ask about those programs. Both candidates had very pointed views on whether those programs are effective or not, and whether you need someone dressed like in tactical gear like they're going to fight in a war zone situation. Both candidates had very poignant views, very to-the-point views of how that should be addressed. Also asked of the mayor candidates were, how would you help, what would you do with juvenile offenders who constantly continue to reoffend before they get to be an adult and turn to their life in crime? What would you implement when dealing with juvenile offenders? And both had very good answers. Both had answers that I could see as plausible ways to deal with the juvenile offenders here in Ocala. And then finally, the last one was about oversight committees. Did either candidate believe that there should be an oversight committee, that any kind of situation that the police are involved in that could be a little hairy, like the George Floyd situation, for instance? Should there be an oversight committee that is like a watchdog of the police department? And one of the candidates stood up and said, it's like any kind of like steering committee or anything in a big corporation. You have a area of the company that oversees and keeps a watch on the people in charge to make sure they're doing the jobs they're supposed to be doing. The other candidate stood up and goes, that's a terrible idea, these oversight committees. We have a committee like that. It's called Internal Affairs. It's called the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, that investigate when there are allegations against the police. So both of them had very different views of how they would be mayor, but both of them, I think, again, at the heart of their discussion, both of them thought their way would be a better Ocala. And after all, let's be honest, whether you agree with people or not, we all agree we're in this for a better Ocala. And once again, I will tell you that every person on that podium last night, all 14 candidates, I left that building believing all 14 of those candidates wanted a better Ocala. And they had ideas how to make a better Ocala. Their ideas just didn't always agree with each other. And that's a good thing that everybody wanted. I didn't feel like anybody wanted to destroy Ocala. And it's been said that people wanted to destroy the system, and they want to do this and they want to do that. Last night, my thoughts were everybody there wanted to make a better Ocala, but what they think is a better Ocala and how to achieve it was markedly different between candidates. That was my take on it. You can go watch it on the Fraternal Order of Police 129, Lodge 129's Facebook page. Also, the Marion County Political Conservative Forum, I believe it's on that page as well. And you can go to my personal Facebook page. I shared it to my personal Facebook page as well. So there's a lot of opportunities that were shared over 20 times. So there's a lot of opportunities to go watch the debate. The debate centered directly around the police and the fire and how the candidates would go about the issues they thought were important to them. So, that some of the things you might want answered weren't appropriate for that last night. That it would be in a general debate. This was not a general debate. This was a debate sponsored by the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 129 and the Professional Firefighters of Ocala Local 2135, and they concerned questions that first responders and police would have. All in all, I think it was a good question and answers. I won't call it a debate because the candidates didn't debate with each other. It was just a good question and answer forum that was put on by these two unions. And thank you to those two unions for, one, allowing me to be a part of what you're trying to accomplish, and two, that you have enough concern that you wanted and by the way, they let off with saying, hey, all we want is for you to make an informed decision. And as a candidate, if you have any questions, come by the Lodge 129 or come by the Local 2135 and ask us. We will answer every question you have as first responders and police as you're trying to do your homework to become a better candidate. So I thought, all in all, it was a fantastic job last night by everybody involved. I think the candidates did well. Ty Schlichter, only candidate not there, but that's because he had a prior engagement that was explained fully by the people who put this event on. It was explained fully why Mr. Schlichter was not in there, and everybody understood that he was not dodging the debate. He was unavoidably unable to attend because of prior engagements that were made years in advance. So we completely understand that. But all in all, it was a good question and answer. And if you get a chance, I really tell you, there is some issues with the audio there. You can hear a hum in the room. Sometimes the audio gets a little low, but Facebook did a good job capturing most of it on closed caption last night, so you have that advantage. But all in all, I think it was a success for the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge 129 and the Professional Firefighters Ocala Local 2135. A lot of attendance, too. It was at the community center at the fire station and police station on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. A lot of attendance. There was not a chair to be had in the room. I know it was stifling hot in the room, even with the air condition turned as low as it would go. They got my fat rear end a fan because I was sweating so bad that it was coming through my dress shirt I had on. Yeah, that's right. I had a dress shirt on. I even wore shoes last night, folks. No flip-flops. I had shoes on. But it was standing room only. Very, very interested gallery. And as was with the REC debate about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, which was standing room only. This is one of the most interesting times in our election history. 4 city council seats and the mayoral seat up for grabs. 5 of the 6 seats that sit up at the podium that are elected for the city council and mayor, 5 of those 6 seats up for election in this election cycle. It was pointed out last night that 30,000 registered voters and only 4,000 or 5,000 people vote in city elections. I implore you to vote. If you're registered to vote in the city, turn out. Do your part. It's your civic duty to go to the polling booth and vote. It is September 21st, although it was pointed out that it will be September 21st and in November for District 4. As I think breaking news, 139 people now running for the spot in District 4. Not really, there's 6 candidates, but that's a lot of people vying for a 2-year position because remember, this is a special election just to fill the last 2 years of the City Councilman Wardell, who resigned his position. So they're going to have to run in 2 years again on the regular election cycle, whereas District 1, 3, and 5 they're up at their 4-year elections, so they're in their normal election cycle. District 4 is a special election to fill the last 2 years of Matt Wardell, who resigned his position, to fill the last 2 years of his seat on City Council. Coming up next, I'm going to tell you some things that you shouldn't put in your dishwasher. 13 things you shouldn't put in your dishwasher. Let's go to the phone lines. Got about 30 seconds. You're on Ocala Talks with Tom Schmidt. And they went away. They wanted more than 30 seconds, I guess. I guess they wanted more than 30 seconds. Couldn't give it to them, so they hung up on me. Well, that happens. I get hung up on a lot, folks. It's one of those things that happens to me all the time. We'll be right back after this timeout. 1370 AM, 96.3 FM. I am Tom Schmitz coming to you from the WOCA studios. We're located just off the runway at the Ocala International Airport right here in the Brick City, beautiful Ocala, Florida. Coming up next, things you shouldn't put in your dishwasher. Some of them are pretty funny that people have tried because, you know, the only way this list is made is people have done it before. Plus, dumb crook news at 10 o'clock. All that yet to come on Ocala Talks. Be right back after this timeout.